I think France go into it as favourites, but I actually had in our predictions England to win it.
France will be going for the Grand Slam. I don't think England will be going for the Grand Slam. I think they'll have lost one by then. On paper, they should be very good, and we should remember that they've got Antoine Dupont coming back, and he is just, obviously, as many people believe him to be the best player in the world.
I struggle in my mind to almost place how good they are at the moment, whereas England, for example, Alex, we've seen it. 11 wins in a row, real clear progression, building strength in depth, seeing out games in the final 20 minutes.
Nobody that I speak to here is talking about that England game yet. It's all on Rome and, the clear and present danger of that fixture.
Hello, this is The Ruck, the journalists' rugby podcast from The Times and The Sunday Times. It is Six Nations Eve, which isn't really a thing, but let's just go with it. Welcome back. I'm Alfie Reynolds, and we're going to be looking ahead to the 2026 Six Nations, which gets underway this week. So coming up on the pod, lots to chat about. To my right, hello to Alex Lowe. How are you, Alex?
Very well, thank you. I'm excited for the pod and Six Nations, which starts early this year.
It does start. It always just comes around. Just all of a sudden, like bang, we're into the Six Nations, and with one less rest week, which we're going to come on to as a bit of a discussion point, it's going to fly by quicker than ever.
Yeah, Thursday night in Paris is a good way to launch it, I'd say.
Absolutely. Also with us in studio is Elgan Alderman. Elgan, how you doing?
I'm very well. I decided to wear my most Six Nations friendly shirt today, where I've got every nation just about covered, I think, on this shirt. It's 1980 centenary chic. I don't know if any listeners remember when Wales and England combined played Scotland and Ireland combined in a 100-year anniversary of the WRU. It's strange to think back that people used to celebrate things the Welsh Rugby Union did, but they did in 1980 anyway. Anyway, I've come in honour of that jersey today.
And those of you that want to see that shirt, you can do on YouTube, because we are now putting episodes of The Ruck on YouTube. Also joining us, the man chuckling down the line that you'll be able to hear, delighted to welcome Mark Palmer back onto the pod. How you doing, Mark?
I'm very well, thanks, right, and feeling decidedly underdressed now.
Well, look, so are all of us in the presence of Elgan most of the time, to be honest, with some of his
Mark's
flamboyant
jumper looks
shirts.
like it's in honour of an Ayrshire winter.
Indeed, that's right. And there's three more underneath.
Well, Mark, we'll be having you on the pod in person when we get to the Calcutta
Yes.
Cup next week. So, no, Alex, Will, myself, we're all going to be up in Edinburgh, looking forward to that. And, massive fixture. We'll have a chat about it. Boys, just to kick us off then, I suppose, tee us up for the whole thing, Six Nations 2026. Alex, I'll come to you first. Who are the favourites?
Oosh. Well, I think France go into it as favourites, but I actually had in our predictions England to win it. And it's hard, isn't it? The championship unfolds, the narratives develop, but my thinking was that I think England come into the championship on a trajectory of growth. They know where their team is, and now it's about improving. I think with some of the changes that France have made, they're trying to trial some new combinations, if you like. They're trying new things. I think Ireland are in the same position. They're going into the championship trying new things, whereas England know where they are, and for them it's about stepping on from an unbeaten autumn. It's about maintaining that momentum of 11 straight wins. So although France France played England on the last day in Paris, therefore with all the quality they have and the depth they have, I understand why France are favourites. But I just feel that where the two or three teams are, if you include Ireland in that, England are in a better position to go and attack and try and win the championship. The others have posed themselves some questions with their selections. They're more in a period of transition than England are, so I can see why France are the favourites, but that's why I've gone for England to win it.
I think everyone's looking towards that possible. People have talked about whether it might even be a Grand Slam decider, France v England on the final weekend. In our predictions, I went for France will be going for the Grand Slam. I don't think England will be going for the Grand Slam. I think they'll have lost one by then. But I think that'll be the match for decide, with France going for the Grand Slam that I think they should get if they are able to achieve what the names in their team suggest they can achieve. Beneath that, I've got Scotland and Ireland in the third and fourth range together, and I think it's Wales and Italy battling at the bottom. But I think even though those are where I think the teams will finish in the table, I think those teams between Scotland and Italy and Wales and Ireland, third, fourth, fifth and sixth, have the possibility of upsetting each other, even if for example, I think Italy might end up ahead of Wales, but I think Wales might possibly be more likely to beat Scotland than Italy. So there's quite a lot at play over the next 6 weeks.
Mark, we've had France and England mentioned in the title discussion. Have you got another name to throw in there, or do you go along those sorts of lines?
No, I very much along those lines. I think in our piece that we have on the site on Monday, I'm going up against the AI Superbot and trying to pit our respective wits against that. Yeah, I think France will win it purely on the basis of, not purely, but largely on the basis of the fact that they are at home on that Super Saturday game against England. Had that been at Twickenham, I would have probably flipped that because I think they'll both be going into it with in a winner-takes-all scenario. Albeit, as Eliza said, there is the chance that I think France could slip up even as early as this first game. I think the demise of Ireland has been potentially overstated, certainly before this little glut of injuries. So it wouldn't be a surprise if Ireland turned them over, or a huge surprise, certainly to me. And equally, France have been a bit flaky at Murrayfield as well in recent times. So, I don't think there will be a Grand Slam this year, but I suspect France have just about enough to do it. And I agree with the lads that below that, just about anything could happen. Italy have both Scotland and Wales at home. No, they don't actually. It's Wales that have Scotland and Italy at home, but I suspect that whereas in previous years it would have been Italy that they'd have been, targeting as a banker, it's Scotland that represents the better opportunity for them this year, particularly given Steve Tandy's inside knowledge of just how to prompt one of those infamous Scottish collapses. So, yeah, there'll be a lot riding on every game as usual, and a lot of unpredictability. But I think France are certainly my favourites.
As Mark said, we blame Will Kelleher for this. Had the idea of putting our predictions for the championship up against ChatGPT to see who ends up coming out best. It is a fool's errand predicting Six Nations, because I think what Elgan said, I can see where he's coming from, and the same with Mark. If you went through each of England's games, I think that's Murrayfield is tricky but winnable. Ireland at home, because of I think where the respective teams are, tricky but winnable. So then you plot out a route. You think, well, they could go to Paris on the last day and be going for a shot at the Slam. However, as Mark says, if Ireland beat France on day one, everything changes, because then Ireland come to Twickenham and they're in a different place. It's that's what we love about it, because you think you know what's going to happen, and you can construct a narrative before it begins about what you think will happen, and then one result changes the whole thing, because changes the mood, changes the momentum, changes the pressure, changes the expectation. That's why we love it. So I think that pre-champ that we'll have a Grand Slam showdown in Paris. I'd love it if that was the case, because what a great story we'd be telling in that week. But there's plenty of opportunities along the way for other teams to chuck a banana skin in the way.
What impact does the one less rest week have, if anything?
I think that'll be really fascinating, because it sounds like it shouldn't, be a massive factor, one fewer week. But having spoken to the coaches at the launch last week, and just the general sense around the camps, people are approaching it in different ways, but they all reckon that this is going to be a bit of a game changer. In that, there's a big, or they perceive a significant difference between, 3 Six Nations games on the bounce as opposed to, 3 autumn games on the bounce, or 3 summer games, which are well used to doing, just with the intensity, the physicality, and the jeopardy of these games, which isn't there or hasn't been there pre-Nations Championship in the autumn and summer. And there seems to be an idea that you might have to mix it up for one game. But, as we've just outlined, when there's so much riding on every game and there's so much unpredictability around every game, which one do you pick? I mean, in Scotland's case, they go to Italy first up, into a Roman cauldron with them all guns blazing. That's not the game that you're going to choose to mix things up. Then they have Calcutta Cup game at home, and then they go to Cardiff, which is another, a big, one fraught with danger. So, somewhere along the line, if they are going to mix things up, they'll be taking a risk, as will every other team. But it would be fascinating to see this new dynamic in play, and if teams gamble and go full pelt for the first 3 games, and then what impact does that have later on with injuries and fatigue? So, yeah, I think it definitely mixes things up in a way that we've not seen before.
it's one of the main reasons why I think Wales are more likely to beat Scotland at home than Italy, because Italy's on that final weekend and you don't know what effect injuries will have had, and Wales can be quite battered and bruised, but current Wales anyway, at the end of autumns, at the end of Six Nations. So yeah, it will play a factor in predictions along those lines.
I think from a coaching perspective, I asked Steve Borthwick this exact question, and he didn't want to present any form of excuse. He just said it presents us with a different strategy. Now, the way that England's fixtures fall, after the fallow week, they go away in Rome and away in Paris. I think the way that they manage and the way they theme these games and prepare for them will change. So England are enjoying it at the moment, and they are working. Like last week was a big fitness block, high intensity, almost get the work in now. Have probably a slightly lesser week in Test week. Then you go into 3 back-to-back games. England are going to have they're only going to be in camp for a short time in the fallow week. It's a good chance for the coaches to then resell the sort of sprint to the finish. For England, it's Rome, then they stay away in Italy before playing France. So it's a coaching challenge as much as anything about how they strategize, but also then how they sell that last sprint. It's different, and from a spectator's perspective, I think it massively improves the championship. That middle game was always 2 games, week off, game, week off. It stuttered in the middle, just at the time when it was starting to build some momentum. And now you got 3 games, set those foundations, week off to build some real anticipation, and then the sprint to the end. I think it's great for the championship. It's harder for players. It's a new challenge for coaches, but it's great for the championship.
It's one of those, isn't it, that for media it's great, for fans it's great. I bet all the players are like, brilliant, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
thanks a lot for the one less rest week.
In a year when, from an England, Scotland and Wales perspective, they're also looking at a summer where they've got to fly to South Africa and back, and then Argentina and back, all within 3 weeks.
Yeah. Well, interesting. And as you say, for all of us and all of you listening, it's a great thing. A couple more actually questions on France. I'll get onto England in just a moment. Elgan, for you, and this is where listeners and viewers are really going to be able to see the in-depth preparation that I do for the pod. How good are France?
It's a very good question. On paper, they should be very good, and we should remember that they've got Antoine Dupont coming back, and he is just obviously, as many people believe him to be the best player in the world, he will improve any team. But I think he's even more important to France than he is to Toulouse, because Toulouse was still able to win the top 14. They didn't quite win in Europe without him, but I think he's just even more central to what France requires. So the fact that they have him back will improve them drastically. The flip side of that is, can he and Jalibert, who on paper should perhaps be the best 9 and 10 in the world, but the feeling is that him and Dupont and Antamac work slightly better from that Toulouse relationship, with Dupont very much in charge, Antamac sort of second fiddle, whereas Jalibert likes being the man in charge at number 10. If they can fire, then the Grand Slam should just be so easy to achieve. If those two can play well together. So yes, there's a lot of doubts over Fabien Galtier at the moment. Is he getting enough out of this France team? Is the one Grand Slam of 4 years ago enough for what they've achieved? Obviously, the World Cup heartbreak they've had, but on paper, this should be theirs to win.
But that's why, from the outset, I said France should be favourites for all those reasons. But there are also way more questions attached to them. When they won the Slam 4 years ago, there were no questions attached to them. There were none of those sort of, well, this is France, we don't know who's going to show up. That they'd got rid of that tag. They went into that championship, and you could have laid your house on them winning that, certainly winning the title, and maybe the Garden Shed on them winning the Slam. They were that, for me, they were that solid. Now they've got all the talent, but there are more questions attached. So that the 9-10 thing is exactly as Elgan says, but also how does the squad react to some of the big selection decisions that have been made? And Damien Penaud hasn't been scoring as he's always been scoring, but he's still a world-class player. Aldrit and Ficou were France captain within the last year. They're not there either. How does the squad react to that? Can Galtier impose on this championship what he's hoping to, which is clearly to kick the team on, maybe fire a warning shot to some, but kick the team on? So that there's huge potential there, but there are also questions that need to be answered, and that's where I don't think England go in with as many kind of posing questions, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's why I ask the questions, because I always find France, they're a funny team to almost track, because they take a second or third string team on their summer tour. So it feels like, anyway, they lose all momentum. Then their big game in November against the Springboks, they lost. No shame in that, losing to the Springboks. Most people do at the moment. But I struggle in my mind to almost place how good they are at the moment. Whereas England, for example, Alex, we've seen it. 11 wins in a row, real clear progression, building strength in depth, seeing out games in the final 20 minutes. They've answered a lot of questions, whereas with France, I look at them and I'm just not quite sure, really, what they're going to look like, even though on paper they look absolutely brilliant. In terms of bringing us on to England, I mean, uncharted territory for the Steve Borthwick project. They come into this Six Nations, as we've just been discussing, properly in the title mix, on this big winning run, and there's expectations around them now.
There are, and yes, it is uncharted territory. They've earned their right to be there, and they've actually embraced that level of expectation, which I think is the right thing for England to do. You know, they, after losing to Ireland on the first day of last year's Six Nations, you get to the end of the year, and England have evolved massively to the point where the whole focus was on bringing Tom Curry and Henry Pollock and Jamie George and Ellis Genge off the bench. They solved the big Achilles heel in that team was they didn't have the nous or the experience or the fitness to last a game. By the end of the year, they did. 11 wins in a row. Some of them were, USA away. They weren't all against top line opposition, but that summer tour allowed them to build depth, really important depth. Guys like Guy Pepper, who then started all November. He had experience. He had a strong starting 15 and an even stronger bench. So he'd fixed the issues that were holding England back. Now the challenge now is to bring that into a championship where there are now expectations. If you build a winning run, people start to get excited. Fans start to get excited. That sport, that's what you want, and that's where I think it's right that Borthwick, instead of just sticking to his "we're only thinking about Wales in the first game" mantra, is happy to say we want to be going to Paris on the last day with a shot at silverware, because that's what people want from the team, and he wants his players to believe that that's what they're chasing, because they've evolved. I think it's an exciting place for England. I think they know who they are as a team. They know their game plan. They've got players who are young and have broken in, who can only get better. Pollock's, Guy Peppers, even Joe Hayes. I know Finn Baxter's injured, but those players are on a path of improvement, and it should be now an opportunity for England to take a step forward and go and win something.
How important is it that they do that, or that they at least head to Paris on the final weekend with a triple crown in the back pocket and the slam on? I
mean, massive. Now,
context is everything, isn't it? Like, you don't know how the game's going to pan out.
If you were to talk to Steve Borthwick, and I did a piece on England's year, and he, it's very hard for a coach to explain this in a way that lands to us or fans, but he doesn't judge, and he can't judge everything on a result. Now, that pattern of 7 consecutive narrow defeats, that wasn't just 7 times getting unlucky. There was a pattern there that needed to be fixed. The results weren't, they were going down. That the graph for results was going down, but the expected wins was staying the same, which was telling him that all the metrics were there. They just needed to find the way of converting narrow defeats into narrow victories, which they succeeded in doing last year. Now, if they were to drop a game away in Murrayfield, or if they were to lose to Ireland at home and finish with 4 wins out of 5, so long as that wouldn't be a failure, I don't think, for England. If they're in the title hunt on the last day, then I think England are where they should be. If they're not in the title hunt, then he'll have to go back and check the development of this team. Have the right players stepped forward in the way they want. Have some of his selections worked. For example, Tommy Freeman at 13. That is a project that I think is going to be a focal point for England this year. So yes, from our perspective, from fans' perspective, England should be going for the title on the last day. And if they're not, if they end up slipping back to a 3 from 5, it will have been a disappointing championship, no question. I don't think it will. What I'm trying to say is, I don't think it will knock England off their path of growth through to the World Cup. But what we can't do is fall into an Eddie Jones cycle of only talking about the World Cup. This team is good enough now to compete for the title. So if they're in the mix on the last day, that's where they should be. If they're not, that'll be a disappointment. But it won't kind of. There's no point in chucking the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, it's not necessarily
the development of this team.
It's not necessarily a failure, is it? Also, really quickly on the team, we're recording this on Monday morning. We're expecting England to name their team today, and it looks like it's touch and go for Tom Roebuck. If he plays it, will be Tommy Freeman at 13. The other thing that I'm really intrigued in with England, we spoke about their bench so much through November. How does Borthwick use it through the Six Nations? In particular, that game away against Scotland, Paris on the final weekend, that home against Ireland. But we'll speak a lot more about that, the England team selection, the Wales team selection as well, on Thursday when we'll have another pod coming your way to tee up the weekend. We'll take a quick break here because next I want to chat to Mark about Scotland. In particular, actually, that game against England in Edinburgh in a couple of weeks' time. So, Mark, Scotland, we'll maybe get onto the Calcutta Cup in just a second. It feels to me that this is the Six Nations that Scotland are coming into a bit more under the radar compared with the last previous years where it was they have to be in a position to win it. Has November and the back end of 2025 kind of dampened expectations for Scotland heading into this Six Nations?
Big time. I mean, in previous years, in fact, a lot of recent history, people have been talking Scotland up, not least themselves before a championship. Whereas I don't think either side of that equation is the case this time. The team have actually taken a very kind of clear stance of not talking themselves up, of damping down expectation and saying, that all that the previous talk of golden generations and whatnot means nothing if they don't then back it up on the field, and they're quite right in that sense. That's been our kind of growing frustration that the apparent talent of this group, the depth of it, isn't then reflected in results. So there's only one way for that to change, and that's certainly not through talking and hyping themselves up. So yeah, I think there is a real kind of certainly not a surplus of expectation internally or externally going into this tournament. That the manner of those November games, I think, contributes heavily to that. They created an excellent platform against New Zealand to claim a maiden win in that fixture. Couldn't do it. Then the following week against Argentina, the manner in which they threw away that game kind of, unfortunately, was part of a pattern that dates back several years of this group. That their ability to mess up seemingly impregnable positions and to in-game fluctuations in performance that are just not what good teams do. It's a too regular theme. Even going back to Rome this weekend, we were reminded that in our previous visit there 2 years ago, Scotland were twice had double-digit leads, surrendered both of them and lost the game late on. So unfortunately, that wasn't a one-off. Even though it was ghastly and dramatic, it was part of a pattern. And I think that's why there isn't an expectation going in here, because people have seen that people don't trust this team. They consider it too flaky in those real kind of clutch moments. So if that answers your question, I think we're probably happier being downbeat, because sometimes that's when there's a pleasant surprise, and it's when Scotland have kind of gone in feeling confident and optimistic that there tends to be a sting in the tail.
And on that, on the first two games, is Italy in Rome a more daunting prospect than England at home for this Scotland team?
At the moment, it potentially is. It potentially is, and I think that's reflected in the fact that nobody that I speak to here is talking about that England game yet. It's all on Rome, and the clear and present danger of that fixture. Not only because of where Scotland are, but where Italy are too. Coming off in November, where they beat the Wallabies for the second time in as many games. They ran the Springboks. They certainly took them deep into that game, 70-75 minutes in Turin, in a way that Scotland hadn't been able to before against a country like that. There's a confidence with Italy. There's a depth there. They've sold out their two home games against Scotland and England, which hasn't happened in a while. But there are alarm sort of signals bleeding around that fixture before anyone's minds even turns the following week, where I know we've talked about it before. Scotland had a long run of success in that fixture, and that kind of sequence of positive results, of wins, and even the mad draw at Twickenham, does a lot of heavy lifting for Gregor Townsend's overall record. Those are definitely amongst the landmark successes of that tenure. But it feels to me that there's been a clear shift in that. Equally, Scotland could easily have won it at Twickenham in 2025, but I think the fact that England have got their act together, they're now hitting levels where, frankly, they should always be, given the kind of the depth of talent available to them. It makes me think that it's now probably back in a position where a Scotland win in the Calcutta Cup will be the exception rather than the norm. But a lot of water to go under the bridge before we get there.
Mark, I was going to ask whether Glasgow would have a better shot in the Six Nations than Scotland, which is probably a slightly unfair question. It was definitely do the team without a Finn Russell or a Ben White. But I guess the point is that Glasgow are flying, and does that increase the pressure on Gregor to kind of, I guess, harness everything that Glasgow are doing well and then add to it? Rather, there seems to be a disconnect between what Scotland do and what Glasgow do, and yet there should be such harmony between the two teams.
I think it absolutely does increase the pressure, and there was a real sort of stark example of the contrast there. With it, 4 weeks after, many of the same players were part of that Scotland team that threw away a 20-plus point lead against Argentina. They overturned one at home against Toulouse, six-time European champions, as part of a kind of perfect pool campaign that they put together with 4 bonus point wins. So Glasgow, nobody questions Glasgow's mentality. They they manage in-game situations well. They can kind of react to disappointment and setbacks kind of on the run in a way that Scotland don't seem to. The Roofs just seems to come in. And when it's, again, as I say, many of the same players, effectively the same cast list, you then say, well, it can't be something inherent in those players. They can't be inherently mentally weak. So what is it about the different environment that produces a different response, albeit with all the usual caveats that, Test rugby is a different beast to Champions Cup. But, I think that there is an absolute obligation on Gregor to harness what they're doing there. That Glasgow have been in excellent form. And I think the variety of what they're doing as well is something that Scotland need to replicate. The Franco Smith has managed to kind of to maintain that kind of Glasgow, that familiar DNA of the attack from anywhere, and scoring some sensational tries. But there's, as I said, there's a real sort of defensive grit and resilience about them. Set piece work, their line out drive is one of the best in Europe. So there are a lot of ingredients there that you'd like to think with the same personnel, the same combinations and units could transfer quite seamlessly to the test arena. And if it doesn't, then people will be pointing fingers at the coach because as I said, the players are ostensibly the same, with the addition of some high profile kind of guns like Finn Russell and Ben White and Blair Kinghorn.
What's the professional relationship like between Gregor and Franco Smith? I mean, would Gregor go to Franco and ask, I don't know, get some work with him? I wasn't going to say get some coaching tips. He doesn't need coaching tips, but you know what I mean? Get some advice on how Franco has moulded that team, how he's instilled some of that grit and mentality in the Glasgow team to help translate it across? Or does Franco think, well, that might be my next job, so I might withhold some of my IP and just keep it with the Warriors?
To be honest, I would doubt that there would be those kind of specific interactions. Probably, and that probably reflects on both characters and the dynamics that you've described there. I don't think it. Gregor is very confident in his own methodology. He's a very curious individual. He goes out and studies a lot of other sports and different environments, but he knows what he's about, and he has a very clear way that he wants to do things, which he believes can be successful. I think where you may see a bit of that kind of flow of ideas is from the playing group. I think that there's been a conscious decision amongst some of them to try and take a bit more ownership and not wait for direction. Certainly that's what they're encouraged to do at Glasgow, is to come up with solutions in the game and not just be constantly looking upstairs for direction. So I think if they can sort of organically bring a bit of that across, then it can only be to everyone's benefit. I think most people are expecting a heavily dominated Glasgow team to be picked for certainly that opening round.
Mark, I totally get what you're saying, that no one in Scotland is looking past a game against Italy, and I totally agree that is potentially will be a really, really tough game. There's a bit more expectation on England to turn up to the Calcutta Cup, obviously having beaten Wales, but I find it impossible to not start looking ahead to the Calcutta Cup. Like, that is just such a massive fixture, isn't it? Given where England are and the expectations and hopes that people and they are placing upon themselves, given where Scotland are and the dominance they've had in that fixture in the last kind of 5-6 years. Like, that is just Six Nations defining for both of those sides, isn't it, on the second weekend?
Yeah, I thought it was supposed to be us that were obsessed with the England fixture as the be all
look how
and
things
end all.
change.
It doesn't sound it now, is it? How the tables turn. But, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And again, you can point to that one as being, it will be a real hinge fixture for both, regardless of what happens on the opening weekend, because, momentum shifts are so dramatic in a 5-game tournament, particularly as we talked about with one fewer week in the mix. So, yeah, it clearly has such huge historical importance. It's a game that Scotland know they can win because they have done so often recently, and they will have a confidence of doing so again, regardless of what happens in Rome. But yeah, as I say, there is a real kind of, and hopefully that speaks to a greater sort of maturity amongst, well, not only the playing group, but the wider Scottish rugby public, that it isn't seen as the be all and end all now, that there's, there's more to do. And it probably speaks to the expectation that has been there certainly previously around, what this group is capable of and what it should be striving for, not just, one-off wins and performances, but stringing those together into a credible title challenge. And although there's not the expectation that they will do that this year, there's always that hope as well. So, yeah.
When you look at Scotland's fixtures, it shows really what we were talking about at the start about how much rides on each game. Because first game, they're going to Rome and they've got to win that one. Second game, it's the Calcutta Cup. Third game, it's the game where Wales are thinking we might actually win this one in Cardiff. Fourth game, it could be France looking to secure a fourth win going into a Grand Slam decider, and then the last one, it's in Ireland, where Scotland haven't won for 16 years and haven't beaten them anywhere for 9. So you can see how every weekend there was just something riding on it.
I was going to say that if anyone is looking ahead, that's the conversation that I've been hearing is about, the split between the first 3 rounds and the final 2, because I think there's a clear sense that Scotland, if they're going to get any business done, it needs to be in those first 3 rounds, because, France at home, yes, they have won that fixture under Gregor, and they will always feel that, particularly when it's a kind of loose v loose game like that tends to be, that that they'll have a chance. Yes, they'll be in it, but that one is an uphill battle. And then, as Elgan rightly pointed out, the recent record against Ireland is diabolically bad. So, at that point, people are probably writing off that last game at this point. So, those first 3 games are actually absolutely critical to how the overall campaign will go. And then you break it down even further week by week. There's opportunity and risk in each. So again, it captures the beauty of this tournament and how quickly things shift and how greatly they shift on individual results.
Well, I'll pull the reins on my Calcutta Cup hype for a week, but I'm saying next Monday we're going all in. Look, we're pushed for time, and we need to mention Italy, Ireland, and Wales. On the Irish, Alex, I suppose the big question that I've been thinking about ahead of this Six Nations is reflecting on the game you were at in Dublin in November, and how big an impact, how big a psychological blow has that defeat to South Africa had on this Irish team, which is a difficult question to answer, but I can't help but thinking about the potential impact of it.
It's such a unique fixture, though, to have come up against a South Africa team who were just there to make a statement.
Just to scrum them off the pitch.
Just scrum them off the pitch. You won't find a Six Nations opponent who can do that to you. So
yeah, true.
If I was Andy Farrell, I would have locked that game away, in a box, and not referred to it, and tried to reflect on some of the areas where Ireland might have been more positive in November. It was such a unique fixture. I'd never seen a game won in that manner, or a team apply that mentality to trying to win a game. It was a humbling experience for Ireland, no question. But I think it's probably best for them that it came at the end of a series, and they could then have this break. So I don't think there'll be a hangover from that particular match. I think where I find interesting with Ireland, which relates a bit to what I said about France and to where England are on that journey, is that they are going to get to the World Cup, and even now actually with senior players who it feels like they're just clinging on. A Tyg Furlong, can he play 5 games across a Six Nations? Gibson Park had a good Lions tour, but he is the AG is, what's the backup if he was to get injured? You know, I just think there are areas where they have questions to answer. They're trying to evolve the team a little bit. James Lowe is not the player he was, I don't think, 2 years ago, and so they've got quality, but they're at a point now where this campaign is massive for the evolution of the team. I don't think they got out of the summer what England got out of that summer, because so many of their resources were away with the Lions. That their evolution is starting now, which I think they've got their timing a bit wrong.
Well, I was going to say, it feels like, 'cause one of the questions I had written down for all of you was who plays fly half for Ireland, which was the same question we were asking last Six Nations. Do you give Sam Prendergast, who is got bags of potential but deficiencies defensively, do you give him the keys? He can run an attack really well. Do you go for Jack Crowley, who has other strengths? Harry Byrne at Leinster. So it's kind of like, I just feel like there's big question marks, isn't there, over some of the selection in this Ireland
team.
And
that's what what I referred to at the start. So I think they've got players of an age who they need to manage them through. South Africa are doing the same with some of their players, but those players in the South African colours play their club rugby in Japan, so it's sort of semi-pro for them. Their season is easy. They can play 12 tests a year. Guys like Peter Steph du Toit, Cheslin Colby. Whereas Ireland, well, they have a luxury at Leinster. It's not quite the same. They've got senior players who they're having to manage through. Then they've got questions to answer. There's no Hugo Keenan.
Yeah, I was going to say they've got big injury list.
Big injuries in the front row. They've got no Hugo Keenan at 15, so I imagine Jeremy Osborne plays 15, really good, sort of versatile player. But you're right. How will their fly half situation play out? I would imagine they play Prendergast because he is a favourite of Andy Farrell. And if Andy Farrell's now trying to build something through and guide this team through a transition, mid-cycle transition, then there's no point getting to the World Cup without having given some of these guys, certainly someone like Prendergast, a chance to grow into the jersey and run the team. But there are clear deficiencies in his game, as high as his ceiling is, and I think they feel his ceiling is higher than Jack Crowley. He's not there yet, but tests are kind of ticking down now. So that's where I feel Ireland have got questions to answer. The fitness of key players, development of young players, evolving the team, game plan. Even last year that felt like we did a big special with Bernard Chapman and Ben Pegner, this clash of styles that felt decisive. It doesn't feel quite as decisive this time. I think Ireland have a lot to learn about themselves in this championship, which makes them different to England.
Yeah, the interesting thing with Irelanders is everything we've gone through there, the injuries, the ageing profile of the squad, a sense that it's a team on the decline slightly that need to rebuild themselves ahead of the next World Cup means I don't think of them as title contenders, but I still think they're good enough on their day to cause so many issues, aren't they? Like when we talk about upsets and we talk about who we think is going to be the favourite and how we see it panning out, Ireland are the team that I think have the potential to just totally turn this championship on its head in terms of what they could do, even though they're maybe not as good as they were a couple of years ago. Mark, in terms of Italy, where are we with the Italians? A good November for them at the back end of last year, wasn't it? That victory against the Wallabies, who admittedly were kind of struggling when it came to the end of the year, but they're building depth. They're a good side. What's your view on the Italians?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they come into it with a bit of a tailwind. They have started to pick up wins in the Six Nations, albeit against Scotland and Wales, which is maybe no huge yardstick. But as you said, they under Quezada, they've been adding layers of depth to the squad, but also to their game. He's gone back to some of those kind of traditional Italian forward-based values, and they've got an excellent pack and set piece. But their three-quarter line again is the envy of many. You've got two absolutely world-class centres there, and then back three options, which even after the horribly unfortunate ACL injury picked up by Eduardo Todaro there during their training camp in Verona, they've got an embarrassment of riches to pick from. There's a sense that they can they will be again competitive in every fixture, and then targeting those those Wales and Scotland games as real opportunities.
2 years ago was a real breakthrough for Italy with the same fixture list they have this year when they beat Scotland, they beat Wales, they drew with France, and then I know they scored late on, but they only lost to England by 3, which is still the one team they haven't yet beaten in this competition. So with that repeat fixture list, their target should absolutely be 2 wins again, and then see what they can get other than Scotland and Wales. Last year felt like a slight regression where they only beat Wales, and they got absolutely stuffed by France again, 73-24, which felt like only Wales's deficiencies kind of saved them last time. But 2 years ago, that was a real breakthrough campaign for Italy. No one's talking about them as the whipping boys of the tournament anymore because of the troubles Wales have been going through. So they should absolutely be looking at 2 wins as sort of a minimum target they should be looking for.
Yeah, I always look at as well the England record, as you mentioned, and at some point that has to come to an end. And this Italy team on their day are really good. Now, listeners who have been with us for a while will remember me last year, Alex, saying that you can't write off Wales in Cardiff against England because that's always a tough fixture. And look what happened. So don't listen to me when it comes to predictions. But yeah, who knows with Italy? What about Wales, Elgan? I mean, Sam Warburton has been writing in his column that he could see they could potentially finish 4th, which surprised me. I'm sure it surprised many of the readers as well.
The thing about the players that Wales have is at no stage during the past 2 or 3 years have I thought they on paper they should be as bad as a team that loses 18 games in a row. But they did lose 18 games in a row. They've only won 2 of their past 21 Six Nations matches, and that sequence started with a game where they were going for the Grand Slam, which shows how crazy the last 4 years have been, winning 1 out of 5 2 successive years and then 2 wooden spoons in a row. I think there was some good evolution on the field during the autumn, even though they shipped more than 50 points 3 times against the big guns. They snuck that win against Japan, which was to finally win in Cardiff again. There was some improvement in the overall attacking structure. There were moments with Dan Edwards at fly half where it looked really good. Blair Murray struggled under the high ball, but again, an attacking member of the back 3, and it'll be interesting to see if we do have Lewis Rees-Zammit playing fullback and maybe Blair Murray shifting over to the wing, or maybe they prioritise a bigger player like Ellis Mee, who went really well at Franklin's Gardens when I was there for the Northampton Scarlets game. But all you're hoping for really is to continue that development that we saw in the autumn, where they did look a better team than they had been in the previous 2 years. Absolutely have to win that Scotland game, I think, because that suddenly then you're going into an Italy game where you might be 0-4 again, looking for to ward off a 3rd wooden spoon in a row. Just given all the horror that's going on off the field at the moment, the constant arguing, there just has to be an improvement on the field and at least 1 win.
I think it's so important that the national team can rebuild some faith with their public. That there are, as everyone's Instagram is probably flashes up, adverts from the WRU selling tickets to all 3 home games. Now, when my first journalistic job covering international rugby, I covered Wales, where it was impossible to get a ticket to a Wales home Six Nations game. Now, the public have I spoke to even someone in England who does the tickets for their club, and couldn't sell all of their allocation for the England-Wales game because there's a chronic lack of faith now in the national team. And I think it would be just terrific if the players, many of whom are going through huge uncertainty in a system that clearly doesn't know which way to turn, if they could deliver some performances, as Elgan says, even in defeat there was optimism in November on the field. If they could get some wins to just rebuild some faith in the public, because all we can do as journalists is tell the story of what's happening, and it is a country in meltdown at the moment. But all that, in some ways, all that does is drive a narrative that forces people to go, well, what's the point in engaging? Why should I go? I'd love it if we could, for the rugby people of Wales, if their national team could produce a couple of wins, performances that would just engage them and bring them back to the national stadium again. And while the politics is what the politics is, if those players could build that faith in the nation and create that connection with their public, I think that would be the biggest success that they could have in this championship.
Even in recent years, the Ireland game last year, which was the first one after Warren Gatland was moved on for a second time and Sherritt came in, I know people in the stadium that day who said they couldn't feel such positivity and goodwill for going back years in the stadium, even going back to maybe the 2019 Grand Slam, just because there was a sense of hope on the field that they almost won. Same again 2 years ago. Mark will remember when Scotland almost imploded with that second half performance where Wales came from, I think, was it 27-0 down, scored 4 unanswered tries. Again, the feeling in the stadium that second half was electric. If people are in there and Wales can get them excited, it is still one of the greatest feelings in sport to be in that stadium when that happens. The trouble is getting it to happen.
and getting the people into the stadium. There's such disaffection with the WRU that I think there's some protest absentees as well going on here. They don't want to be... they feel they've just lost all belief in the direction of travel, and it's not fair that the players should have to be the ones to rebuild those bridges, but that's the way that's their opportunity, I think, this championship. If they can do that, and if they still finish with 1 win or 2 wins, but they can harness that electricity that does surge around that stadium when there is hope. That would be a success for me.
So it kicks off this weekend. France against Ireland on the Thursday. Italy, Scotland, the 2:10 kickoff on Saturday. And then it's England against Wales. The next pod coming your way on Thursday, where we will react to the England-Wales team news. Mark, great to have you back on the pod. We'll speak to you soon.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
And Elgan, Alex, I'll speak to both of you later in the week, I would imagine.
See you in the week.
Looking forward to it.
Good stuff. If you want to drop us an email, the email address is theruck@thetimes.co.uk. Thanks very much for listening. We'll be back with you on Thursday.